Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at some of our top stories. US President Donald Trump says Hamas didn't want to deal as the US and Israel walk away from peace talks. Amidst uncertainty over diplomacy, Israel has said it will allow countries to drop aid into Gaza by air, with the UK among nations set to support the efforts amid an ongoing humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has arrived in Scotland for a 4-day visit as he confirms that trade discussions with the EU are ongoing, saying a deal is 50-50. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen will meet the President on Sunday ahead of the August 1st tariff deadline. Cambodia has called for an immediate ceasefire as military action along the disputed border with Thailand continues. This comes after dozens of casualties were reported from both sides, with more than 100,000 people displaced from the border region. The US has warned China to stop fueling Russia's aggression in Ukraine at the United Nations ahead of potential US sanctions on buyers of Russian energy. China has hit back, though, accusing Washington of trying to shift blame and spark controversy. Voters in Taiwan are casting their ballots on whether to recall 1/5 of the island's parliament, all from the major opposition party. Supporters of the move say the opposition is too close to China amid heightened tensions over Taiwan's independence. Ghislaine Maxwell, an associate of the late financier Jeffrey Epstein, is seeking a Supreme Court hearing in a bid to potentially overturn her conviction. This comes amid allegations about Epstein's relationship with President Trump, which he has denied as fake news. The Sudanese Rapid Support Forces have been accused of massacring dozens of people in the southern village of Kordofan. Activist groups say the attack was carried out over 2 days as Sudan continues to face a devastating civil war. And the Trump administration has reassigned around 1,700 military personnel to help with immigration law enforcement. The Pentagon confirmed the move, working with ICE partners. But we start this hour in the Middle East, and amid growing uncertainty over the truce between Israel and Hamas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that his government was considering alternative options to ceasefire talks with Hamas. This comes after both Israel and the US recalled their negotiating teams. Meanwhile, a Hamas official said that negotiations were expected to resume next week and portrayed the recall of the Israeli and American delegations as a pressure tactic. Egypt and Qatar, who are mediating the talks alongside the United States, said the pause was only temporary and that talks would resume, though there's no clarity on when. The negotiating teams left Qatar as President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff said Hamas's latest response to proposals for a deal showed a lack of desire to reach a truce, and that even the US is now looking at alternative options. Well, this comes while there's a stall in ceasefire talks and hunger worsening in Gaza. After months of partial food blockades, Israel has said foreign countries can drop aid into Gaza from today. Israeli army radio quoted a military official as saying, however, it has not been confirmed independently. As per reports, an IDF official has also said that the World Central Kitchen has also begun reactivating its operations in the region. Pro-Palestinian protesters have gathered outside the UN headquarters in New York as a groups warn of surging cases of starvation. Jewish and Arab Israeli protesters in Jaffa, south of Tel Aviv, are also protesting, calling for an end to the war in Gaza and to stop starving Gaza, as aid groups war surging numbers of malnourished children in Gaza. Meanwhile, many experts, as well as the United Nations, have warned that Gaza is being pushed closer to a famine. Well, joining us to discuss both of these huge developments in the ongoing Gaza war, Dr. Satoru Nagao, a foreign affairs expert who is joining us from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, as always, thank you for joining us. Let's first look at diplomacy. Let's look at the withdrawal of US and Israeli delegations from these discussions in Doha over a potential ceasefire deal. Hamas saying this is a tactic, but we've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump saying that a deal is no closer to being done and Hamas don't want to get a deal done. How significant is this in the face of the humanitarian crisis on the ground?
This is, of course, the situation in Gaza, humanitarian crisis is serious, but at the same time, originally this ceasefire negotiation faced one very zero-sum problem, because Israel cannot live with the terrorists because terrorists attacked Israel. But at the same time, the terrorist side, of course, the Hamas side cannot accept Israel eliminate them. So Hamas try to survive, and Israel try to eliminate them. So this is zero or sum negotiation, and both sides cannot agree. So that's why this is very difficult, tough negotiation originally. So that's why it is natural if they do not agree. But at the same time, if they do not agree, the war hasn't ended. So this means that the siege has continued and the humanitarian crisis was deteriorating. So that's why it has happened.
Yes, absolutely. But there is, of course, concern. There has been optimism from the United States and Israel over getting a deal done. That optimism now seems to have faded. Where do we go next, Dr. Nagao?
The problem is because of the humanitarian crisis deepen, and Israel cannot allow the Hamas to deliver the food. This means that they ask the US NGO to deliver the food. But in this case, Hamas worry about influence of the US NGO instead of them. So that's why Hamas could will attack them. So that's why it is not easy to deliver the enough amount of the food in the Gaza by US NGO. So in this case, the amount of the food is facing the shortages. So that's why the US and Israel allows the other countries, Jordan, the US, deliver the food from the air. So, but from the air means that it relies on the amount of food plane can carry. So that's why it is limited. So that's why still the problem has continued.
Yes, and Dr. Nagao, before we move on, let's look at that announcement from Israel that they will allow countries to drop aid into Gaza by air. Of course, Israel throughout this aid blockade saying that they're doing so Hamas don't get hold of this aid. But if it's coming from air, who's going to be monitoring it and how will it stop getting into the hands of Hamas? It sounds slightly contradictory.
Hamas can get some limited amount of the food from the air, but anyway limited because of the airplane carries only limited amount. So that's why this is a road. But if the land route is opened, Hamas can get more, and Hamas get more food and resources, and deliver the people and control the people. So this means that Hamas influence will grow. So that's why the Israel cannot allow to open the route, land route. But so instead of this, they allow the air route, but which is very limited.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Nagao, you will be joining us later on the programme. Of course, lots of developments coming from the Gaza enclave and diplomatic efforts will be here to continue bringing you all of the further updates we get today. But we move on now, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has confirmed she will meet US President Donald Trump this Sunday in Scotland to discuss a potential trade deal between the European Union and the United States. Trump called the agreement with the EU the biggest deal of them all, if successful, though he admitted there are 20 different sticking points in negotiations. Let's listen.
I would say that we have a 50-50 chance, maybe less than that, but a 50-50 chance of making a deal with the EU. And it'll be a deal where they have to buy down their tariffs, because they're right now at 30%. And they'll have to buy them down, maybe, or they could leave them the way they are. But they want to make a deal very badly.
Well, both sides are focused on averting the looming 30% tariffs set to take effect next week. And with a baseline agreement of 15% tariffs on EU goods, discussions are intensifying. If the deal goes through, it would reshape transatlantic trade relations significantly. Well, with us to discuss these developments, Ross Feingold, a political analyst joining us from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. We've discussed the significance of a trade deal between the United States and the EU many times, but of course it's becoming more important now with that deadline looming and getting ever closer. Of course, 1st of August is the deadline that Trump has set for nations to agree on deals. This is huge for both sides. Absolutely a huge amount of trade going on between the US and the 27 nation bloc. Do you think this meeting on Sunday is the final chance to get a deal done, given that deadline, or could Trump potentially move his deadline, as we've seen him do in the past, if it doesn't get over the line right now?
Either one is a possibility. Not being in the room, we don't know how close or how far they are from a deal. The good news is that they're talking, and they're talking at the highest level. It doesn't get any higher than von der Leyen meeting directly with Trump. So that's a positive. Another positive is that there's recent agreements that the United States has made with other trading partners, such as Japan, which kind of provide a template for the things that the Trump administration is looking for. So that provides some useful knowledge to the European Union side in engaging with the Trump administration. And another thing to keep in mind is I think both leaders are under pressure from industry to reach a deal. Business leaders are not rooting for a trade war. Business leaders are not rooting for disruption to the flow of goods, to supply chains. So even though President Trump seems set on raising tariffs on most U.S. trading partners in the absence of reaching a deal, he's also under pressure from business leaders as well, and I'm sure they've communicated that to the White House. So both sides have incentives to reach a deal, but to your final point, is it possible that Trump might extend the deadline? Well, we have to say yes, because he's done that before.
Absolutely. Ross, Donald Trump talking about potentially 20 different sticking points. Could you provide us with some context on what that might mean?
The United States has had issues with tariff and non-tariff barriers in the European Union for many years, just like it's had with its other trading partners around the world, including its most significant trading partners like Japan. So it's not a surprise that the list is lengthy. The rules for goods, especially agricultural goods, to enter the European Union are incredibly complex. The United States has long complained about EU subsidies to various industries, both agriculture as well as manufactured goods. So there's many issues that have been unresolved in the bilateral relationship. And it's clear that the approach of the Trump administration in these negotiations, not just with the European Union, but with other trading partners as well, is to say, here are all the issues that we have with you. And one interesting thing that Trump always says when he's talking about trade, and he brings this up a lot when he talks about trade with China, he says he doesn't blame the other country, right? He blames previous U.S. presidents for letting the other side get away with such good deals and taking advantage of the United States on trade. So the Trump administration is basically saying, here are all the legacy issues, and we want to resolve all of them in this negotiation. So I think the Trump administration does deserve a little bit of credit for trying to resolve all those issues.
Ross, thank you for that insight. Of course, lots to discuss on trade and US tariffs ahead of that August 1st deadline, and we will bring all of those updates to you. Ross, you will be staying with us as we move away from Europe, as polls have opened in Taiwan for a high-stakes recall vote that could shift control of the island's parliament and send a strong message to China. Voters will decide whether to unseat 24 lawmakers from the opposition Kuomintang or KMT party. Another 7 face recall votes next month. President Lai Ching-te, Democratic Progressive Party or DPP, needs at least 12 of those lawmakers removed today to gain temporarily control of the 113-seat legislature. The recall push follows months of political gridlock. While Lai won the presidency in 2024, the DPP lost its legislative majority. The KMT has since blocked key bills and defence spending. The DPP accuses the KMT of being too close to Beijing. Taiwan's government has also accused China of trying to interfere in today's vote. To succeed, each recall must get more votes in favour than against and reach at least 25% of registered voters. Polls close at 4 p.m. local time, with results expected tonight. Well, Ross, thank you for staying with us. We discussed the significance of this vote, of course, yesterday on the programme. Today, now polls are open. How significant could this shift be if the recall vote goes one way or another? Could President Lay's integrity be damaged if it doesn't go his way, given the fact that it is a risk to the opposition, of course?
There's some risk for President Lai, keeping in mind that not only is he president, but he's chairman of the Democratic Progressive Party. So he has a highly significant political role in this as well. Now, the recalls were initially launched by civil society organizations, but those civil society organizations are clearly aligned with the DPP, and DPP politicians have gone all in supporting the recall of the opposition legislators. So this is a highly partisan issue. Also, you should keep in mind that President Lai was elected in January 2024, but with only 40% of the vote. The other 60% was split among two opposition candidates. So to answer your question, if the recalls are unsuccessful, it certainly would weaken President Lai's position. He would not have a majority in the legislature going forward for the remaining three years of his term, and that would put him at a significant disadvantage. And it would also leave a lot of wounds in society. People would say your party supported this, brought this forward, and it was a failure. On the other hand, if it's successful, he's going to be thrilled because he'll regain a majority in the legislative yuan, or Taiwan's parliament, and that will enable him to proceed with his entire program for the remaining 3 years of his term.
Yes, absolutely, Ross. And of course, a potential win for President Lai. But China, of course, in the background, allegations of potential Chinese influence. But they must be watching closely to this election because it will, of course, have an impact on how the country looks towards China and in the face of continued calls for reunification.
There's been comments by Chinese government spokespeople as well as the state media opposing the recall. Of course, the recall successful recalls would benefit President Lai, and China doesn't like President Lai. So it's no surprise that China has publicly criticized the recall and opposed it. However, I don't think that really affects voters' decisions. Voters here, they're going to vote yes or no based on how they perceive the performance of the legislators. They're not going to vote based on what Chinese media says. But it's getting, the statements from China have certainly gotten a lot of attention, and some people do label it as interference in a Taiwan internal political matter.
Thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that unique insight, also discussing, of course, the EU-Trump discussions as well. We will continue to bring all of the updates from that vote, with results expected later today. But we move on now, and according to reports, the death toll from the ongoing clashes between Thailand and Cambodia has now risen to 33, despite calls for an immediate ceasefire. The clashes marks the most intense conflict between the two countries in years. It has involved artillery, tanks and airstrikes, leaving both sides with significant casualties. In Cambodia, 13 people have been confirmed dead, whereas Thailand has reported 20 deaths. The violence erupted from a long-standing border dispute with both nations, accusing each other of initiating the conflict. The UN Security Council has called for maximum restraint and a peaceful resolution, while Cambodia has urgently requested a ceasefire. Thailand has expressed willingness for diplomatic talks, with Malaysia offering to mediate. However, tensions remain high, with fears that the conflict could spiral further. Well, joining us to discuss these developments, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, a journalist from the Korea Herald, joining us live from Seoul in South Korea. Dr. Kumar, of course, significant actions and moves coming, continued artillery action, continued firing along that disputed border, but Cambodia now calling for an immediate ceasefire. How significant is this move?
This should be seen as a non-escalatory comment from the Cambodian side, and especially the unconditional and immediate ceasefire request should be seen as a positive development right now. although the death toll has risen to 32, and 19 people have died from Thailand, and it includes not only military personnel but civilians and children as well. And from the Cambodian side also, they have lost 13 people, including military and civilians. This is a situation which must be de-escalated, and it is a good news at least that Cambodia has urged for immediate ceasefire. But another new development is that yesterday the permanent ambassador to United Nations of Thailand has also agreed for not the ceasefire, but they have also come up to de-escalate the things through peaceful resolution of this whole escalation from both the sides. So there is a pin of hope, but that hope must be brought into practice. And that is why ASEAN chair Malaysia's role is very important here. And the bilateral channels role are also very important. So
Yes.
these bilateral channel and restoration of diplomacy is the way to dialogue, and this is the urgent need right now to minimize these death tolls and to protect the ASEAN region.
Absolutely. Dr. Kumar, I'm glad you brought up Malaysia, of course. They have offered to potentially mediate. Thailand also talking about potential mediation and diplomacy. It seems that a shift has taken place within the last 24 hours or so. Initially, Thailand saying that this is a bilateral matter and no third-party intervention will be necessary. But of course, now with an escalating situation and deaths in double digits on both sides, it seems that a shift is moving. If Malaysia isn't the country to hold these discussions and broker a potential conversation around peace, who could be? We've heard China talk about the need for diplomacy, also the US as well. Does this require multinational intervention, or will Malaysia be positioned perfectly to resolve the issue themselves?
If the conflict is resolved through regional initiative and regional cooperation through ASEAN and bilateral channel, that would be, I think, the most ideal way right now, because already the world is facing two major crises, and various channels are involved there also, but it is taking time. So I think involvement of US right now is not urgent, but if both the countries can, if they can solve through bilateral channel involving ASEAN, then that would be also be sending a good message to even the US also. And there are some elements here which are really needed to be discussed to facilitate the bilateral channel and the dialogue. It is one of the priorities of Thai government is to bring the Ottawa Convention and the Siem Reap Angkor Declaration to be in dialogue, and Cambodia also has to come up with some sort of like dialogue diplomacy on this, like how to resolve these landmine issues, because both the parties, I mean both the countries, Cambodia and Thailand, are signatory to the Ottawa Declaration. So this kind of initiatives must be coming in a few days if really diplomacy has to be restored. But right now, the urges that has appeared from both the sides, it must be brought into practice right now. So that is why bilateral channel and ASEAN chair is the best and is the ideal solution from my perspective.
Absolutely. Dr. Sanjay Kumar, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. We will continue to monitor the situation on the ground and the diplomatic efforts to end this conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. But away from the Indo-Pacific, we now move to Africa, as Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have reportedly killed at least 30 civilians in a two-day assault on a village in the country's western region of Kordofan. As the war between the paramilitary troops and the regular army roar into its third year, Kordofan has emerged as a key battlefront. Paramilitaries seek to consolidate their control in the west after losing the capital Khartoum. The emergency lawyers has said that the paramilitary troops' indiscriminate killing of civilians constituted a serious violation of international law. The Monitor has also reported that there are sporadic clashes between paramilitary fighters and armed civilians in Brima Rashid village, a key transit point for the army. The emergency lawyers have also said that in recent days, violence has spread across En Nouad, with reports of dozens of civilians and residential areas attacked. Well, joining us back on the programme, Dr. Satoru Nagao, foreign affairs expert, joining us from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you for rejoining. The situation in Sudan, of course, is a difficult one, a civil war which has led to civilian casualties, thousands potentially, and millions of people displaced. This attack, of course, dozens potentially killed. What needs to be done from the wider international community to try and resolve this issue with continued deaths reported on a near daily basis?
Why international community hasn't intervened so much is because of the motivation. Because there are many conflicts in the world, but each country cannot afford much resources to help this, because their government is taking charge for them. But at the same time, in case of Sudan, the Sudan's conflict, internal conflict, is indeed, it is not easy to control. Because originally, this RSF is originally setting up by the Sudanese army, which now the army and RSF are fighting each other. But originally, army support established this RSF to deal with the Darfur region's rebellion. And but of course, bad reputation was spread because this RSF originally is Janjaweed militia attacks civilian many places in Darfur. Now, after that, they are the part of the government and they form the RSF. And now, since this April 2025, they declared independence the western side of Sudan. But from the origin of this organization, they are the militia. But at the same time, the Sudan army has many problems inside too, because so that's why Sudan was separated in the north and south in the past. So now they face the east and west, and so this is a conflict continue and separate each region, and it is not easy to control. Under such kind of situation, the view from the international community, such kind of complicated issues, they do not want to intervene. So that's why it has continued, because of the complexity of this region, but at the same time, because of the other country want to take distance.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, as always, thank you for joining us. The situation in Sudan is a difficult one, but we will continue to bring you all the updates from the ongoing civil war. But that is all we have time for now. We will be back shortly with more of your latest international news. Thank you very much.